Hello there, and welcome to Deep Earth Stories. Get comfortable. Turn the lights down if you can. Because what we are about to explore together has been waiting a very, very long time for someone to listen. But before that, tell me in comments, where are you listening from and what time is there right now? And please subscribe to my channel. Tonight, we are going to travel somewhere very old, not a place you can visit on a map, not a country with a name you already know. We are going somewhere older than most countries, older than most languages still spoken today. We are going to a place that exists only in stone and clay and silence. Maybe you are lying in bed right now. Maybe the room is dark, or nearly dark. Maybe there is a small light somewhere, a lamp, a phone screen, the pale glow of a streetlight coming through the curtain. That is okay. You do not need to see anything tonight. You only need to listen. Get a little more comfortable. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw relax. You do not have to hold anything tightly right now. Whatever is on your mind, the lists, the worries, the things you meant to do today, they will wait. They are good at waiting. Tonight, they can rest too. Take one slow breath, and let me tell you about the most mysterious thing humans have ever made. Not a weapon, not a machine, not a building, though buildings are impressive in their own right. The most mysterious thing humans have ever made is a mark. A small, deliberate mark on a surface. A line pressed into wet clay. A shape carved into stone. A symbol painted on a wall deep inside a cave. These marks were made by real people. People who had names, who loved others, who got cold in winter and felt the sun in summer. And they made these marks because they had something to say. But here is the quiet mystery at the centre of tonight's story. We do not know what they said. We have found hundreds of ancient writing systems from all across the world. Some we have decoded. Some we cracked after long years of patient work. But there are others, old, carefully made, clearly meaningful, that no one on earth today can read. Not a single word. Not a single name. Just shapes. Just symbols. Just silence. And tonight, we are going to sit with that silence. We are going to look at these lost languages the way you might look at a distant light on the water at night, with wonder, with gentleness, with no need to rush toward it or grab it. Because some mysteries are not meant to be solved tonight. Some mysteries are meant to be felt. So let us begin. Chapter 1. The first time someone wrote. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a field at dusk. The sky above you is turning that deep shade of blue it gets just before dark. Not black yet, but no longer blue in the ordinary way. More like ink spreading through water. Slow and soft. You are standing in the land that would one day be called Iraq, but right now it has no name like that. It is simply the place between two rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates flow nearby, dark and wide, carrying silt from the mountains far away. It is about 5,000 years ago. There is a city here, small by our standards, but enormous by theirs. Thousands of people live together in mud brick houses built close together along narrow paths. There are potters and farmers and weavers and merchants. There are priests and officials. There are children chasing each other in the fading light. And somewhere in this city, in a room that smells of wet earth and lamp oil, a person is sitting cross-legged on the floor with a small tablet of soft clay resting in their hand. They pick up a thin reed, cut at an angle, like a small stylus, and they press it into the clay. The pressing makes a small wedge-shaped mark. They make another. And another. Arranging them carefully, deliberately, in a pattern that means something. This is not random. This is not decoration. This is writing. This is one of the earliest moments we can point to and say, here, right here, a human being was writing down a thought. The writing system they used is called cuneiform. That word comes from the Latin word for wedge, because of the wedge-shaped marks the reed made in the clay. Cuneiform was used for thousands of years across many different cultures and languages. It started as a way to keep records: how much grain was stored, how many animals were traded, how much a worker was owed. In a way, the earliest writing was not poetry, it was accounting. But over time, cuneiform grew. It stretched and deepened. It was used to write laws, myths, prayers, letters, and stories. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories ever written down, was pressed into clay tablets in cuneiform. A story about a king who feared death and searched for immortality. A story that is, in a way, still being told today. We can read cuneiform now. Scholars decoded it in the 19th century, and today, trained readers can sit with an ancient clay tablet and tell you what it says. So cuneiform is not one of our mysteries tonight. But cuneiform matters because it shows us something important. Writing did not appear by accident. It grew slowly over centuries out of human need. The need to remember. The need to communicate across distance and time. The need to say, I was here, this happened, this is what I knew. And that need is the same across every culture that ever developed writing, whether in Mesopotamia, or China, or Mesoamerica, or the Indus Valley, or Egypt. The shapes are different, the materials are different, the sounds and the meanings are different. But the human need underneath them is the same. We all want to leave a mark. We all want to be understood. And some of us, some of the oldest among us, the ones who pressed reeds into clay or carved lines into stone 5,000 years ago, are still waiting to be understood. Chapter 2. The Valley That Forgot Its Own Name. Now let your mind travel east, out of the riverlands of Mesopotamia, over wide plains, across dry hills, and into a place that is warm and flat and crossed by a river that floods gently every summer. This is the Indus Valley. Today it covers parts of what we call Pakistan and northwestern India, and about 4,000 years ago, maybe a little more, it was home to one of the largest civilizations on Earth. Let that settle for a moment. One of the largest civilizations on Earth. At its peak, the Indus Valley civilization, also called the Harappan civilization, named after one of its major cities, may have had a population of over 5 million people. Its two largest cities, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were built with a level of urban planning that still impresses engineers and archaeologists today. They had straight streets laid out on a grid. They had multi-storey houses built from baked brick. They had a sophisticated drainage system, covered sewers running under the streets to carry wastewater away. They had public baths. They had granaries for storing food. They had workshops for crafting jewellery, pottery and small figurines. They had trade routes that reached all the way to Mesopotamia. We know this because Indus Valley artefacts have been found in ancient Sumerian sites, and Sumerian objects have been found in Indus Valley cities. These people were not isolated. They were connected to the wider ancient world. And they had writing. We know they had writing because they left it behind. Thousands of small objects, mostly stamp seals made from a soft stone called steatite, have been found carved with symbols. These seals were probably used in trade, pressed into soft clay to mark goods or verify identity. Each seal typically shows an animal, a bull, a unicorn-like creature, an elephant, a rhinoceros, alongside a short row of symbols. Those symbols are the mystery. They are called the Indus Script, and as of today, they have never been decoded. This is not for lack of trying. Scholars have been studying the Indus Script for over 100 years. Dozens of serious attempts have been made to crack it. Theories have been proposed, debated, published, celebrated, and then quietly set aside when they could not hold up under scrutiny. The Indus Script remains one of the most stubbornly silent mysteries in all of human history. And when you look at these symbols, and you can because photographs of them are everywhere online, you feel something strange. They are clearly a system. There are about 400 to 600 distinct signs, though many appear more often than others. The signs are arranged in rows, written from right to left. Some signs appear together frequently, like common word combinations. There are patterns that suggest grammar, or at least structure. This looks like language. It feels like language. It has the bones of language. But we cannot hear it speak. Part of the problem is the size of the samples. Most inscriptions are very short, just 4 or 5 signs long. The longest known Indus inscription has about 26 signs. Compare this to Egyptian hieroglyphics, where long wall texts gave scholars enough material to find patterns and repeating phrases. Or compare it to Linear B, another ancient script, which was decoded in the 1950s partly because of long accounting tablets with lots of context. The Indus Script gives us very little to work with. Short inscriptions, no bilingual text, no ancient Rosetta Stone that shows the same message in both Indus Script and a language we already know. No long narrative texts. No dictionary. No guide. Just animals. And symbols. And silence. Some researchers believe the Indus Script represents a Dravidian language, an ancestor of languages still spoken in southern India today. Others think it may be related to an early Indo-European language. Some scholars have even argued that it is not a true writing system at all, that it might be a proto-writing system, using symbols to represent ideas or categories rather than sounds. This last theory is controversial. Many other scholars push back strongly against it, pointing to the structured, rule-governed patterns of the signs as evidence that they do represent language in some form. But here is the honest truth, and it is a truth worth sitting with tonight. Nobody knows. And maybe that is all right. The people of the Indus Valley built cities that lasted for centuries. They traded with distant lands. They made beautiful objects, delicate beaded necklaces, small clay toys, bronze figurines of dancing women that still look graceful and alive today. They organised their communities in ways we do not fully understand, but that seemed to have been relatively peaceful. We have found few weapons, few signs of warfare, few grand palaces or temples that suggest a single ruler demanding worship. They seem, in some quiet way, to have lived differently from other ancient civilizations. And then, around 1900 BCC, roughly 3,900 years ago, the civilization began to decline. The cities were abandoned, the trade routes fell silent, the population scattered. We do not know exactly why. Climate change may have played a role, the rivers may have shifted, the monsoon rains may have weakened, the land may have dried. There may have been migrations of new peoples into the region. There may have been disease. We do not know. The civilization faded, and as it faded, knowledge of its script faded with it. No one passed down the key. No one wrote a translation. The last person who could read those seal inscriptions lived and died without leaving us a guide. And so we sit, 4,000 years later, looking at a row of small carved symbols on a piece of stone the size of a matchbox. And we wonder, what does this say? Was it a name? A prayer? A merchant's mark? A warning? A blessing? Was it something simple and practical? Or something deep and ceremonial? We do not know. And there is a kind of ache in not knowing. A gentle, quiet ache. Like the feeling of almost remembering a dream. You know something was there. You can feel the shape of it. But the words are gone. If your eyes are feeling a little heavy right now, that is a good thing. Let them rest. The symbols will still be there when you wake. They have waited 4,000 years. They can wait a little longer. Chapter 3. The Island That Spoke in Spirals. Now let us travel somewhere smaller, somewhere more contained. Let us travel to the Mediterranean Sea, to a large island that sits between Greece and Egypt, an island that has been inhabited for thousands of years, passed through empires, shaped by trade winds and sun. This is the island of Crete. Today, Crete is a popular place for holidays. White buildings, blue shutters, olive trees, warm stone paths, but long before the tourists and the olive oil and the postcard views, Crete was home to one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient Mediterranean world. They are called the Minoans. We named them after their legendary king, Minos, the figure from Greek mythology who built a labyrinth to hide the Minotaur. Of course, that is a myth, but like most myths, it contains echoes of something real. The Minoans did build complex palace structures. They did have a rich, elaborate culture full of symbols and rituals. And they had writing, more than one kind actually. The earlier of the two is called Cretan hieroglyphics, not the same as Egyptian hieroglyphics, though the word hieroglyphic just means sacred carving in Greek, and scholars used it for both systems because both used pictorial symbols. Cretan hieroglyphics dates to around 2100 to 1700 BCE. It has never been fully decoded. But tonight, let us focus on the second Minoan script, because it has a special quality that makes it deeply strange and beautiful. It is called Linear A. The word linear means it is made of lines, not pictures, but abstract line-based symbols. Linear A was used by the Minoans from roughly 1800 to 1450 BCE. It appears on clay tablets, on ceremonial objects, on storage vessels, and on the walls of the Great Palace of Akrotiri on the nearby island of Thera. And it has never been decoded. Now, here is where things get interesting in a gentle, slightly mysterious way. Linear A was the parent script of another writing system called Linear B. Linear B was used by a later civilization, the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece, and Linear B was decoded in 1952 by a British architect named Michael Ventris, who spent years of patient, obsessive work cracking it. When he finally succeeded, it was a landmark moment in the history of archaeology. Linear B turned out to record an early form of Greek, one of the oldest written Greek we know of. But here is the problem. Even though we can read Linear B, and even though Linear A is clearly related to it, they share many of the same symbols, we still cannot read Linear A. Why? Because the underlying language is different. Linear B used a writing system borrowed from Linear A, but adapted it for Greek sounds. When we take the sound values from Linear B and try to apply them to Linear A, we get strings of sounds that do not match any known language. They do not sound like Greek. They do not sound like any language from the region that we know of. The Minoan language, the language that Linear A was created to write, remains completely unknown. We have no idea what family of languages it belongs to. No idea if it is related to any language still spoken today. No living descendants, no bilingual inscriptions, no ancient Greek scholar who wrote down a Minoan grammar guide, just those line-based symbols pressed into clay arranged in careful rows. And then there is the other object, the one that does not fit neatly into any category. The Phaistos Disc. If you have never seen the Phaistos Disc, try to picture this. A round clay disc, about 15 centimeters across, roughly the size of a large bread roll if you flattened it. On both sides of this disc, arranged in a spiral pattern from the outside edge inward to the center, are stamped symbols. 45 distinct symbols, repeated in various combinations in a spiraling line that you follow like a coiled path into the center. The symbols are beautiful. There is a walking man, a plumed head, a shield, a cat, a fish, a bird in flight, a flower, an arrow, a glove, strange geometric shapes mixed with recognizable images. The disc was found in 1908 in the ruins of the Palace of Phaistos in southern Crete. It dates to around 1700 BCE, and it is, as far as we know, unique. No other object like it has ever been found. There have been theories, many theories, about what the Phaistos Disc says. Some people think it is a religious hymn or prayer. Some think it is a calendar. Some think it is a military document. Some think it is a game board or a teaching tool. One researcher proposed it was a hymn to a Minoan goddess. Another proposed it recorded an astronomical cycle. None of these theories have been convincingly proven, because we do not know the language, and we do not know the symbols' meanings, and we have only one example of this specific system of symbols. There is nothing to compare it to. There is no other disc. There is no translation written on the back. There are no other inscriptions with the same symbols that could give us context. The Phaistos Disc is, in a very literal sense, a message in a bottle. It arrived. It survived. It is here, in a museum in Heraklion on the island of Crete, behind glass, in careful climate-controlled quiet. But we cannot open it. The message is sealed inside its own silence. And there is something about that. Something about a spiral of symbols that someone pressed carefully into clay 3,700 years ago, clearly meaning. Something, clearly saying something, that makes the quiet of tonight feel very large and very deep. Like standing at the edge of a dark ocean and hearing waves you cannot see. Beautiful, a little mysterious, completely unhurried. Let the spiral rest in your mind for a moment. There is no need to solve it tonight. It has been unsolved for thousands of years. It is comfortable with mystery. You can be too. Chapter 4. Linear A and the Shape of Silence. Sometimes the most haunting things are the ones that almost speak. Linear A is almost speaking. The symbols are familiar because some of them became the symbols of Linear B, which became the writing of early Greek civilization, which eventually flowed down through centuries, and transformations into the alphabet you are hearing right now. In a quiet way, there is a chain from those Minoan symbols to the words in this sentence, a long, broken partial chain, but a chain nonetheless. When you look at a Linear A tablet, you are looking at something that is at the same time deeply familiar and completely foreign. The shapes are almost recognizable, the way a word in a language you do not speak can sometimes almost sound like a word you do know. Close, but not close enough. Near, but not near enough. Scholars who study Linear A have made some progress, even without being able to read it. They have identified signs that likely represent numbers. They have found signs that seem to appear in lists, which suggests accounting or inventory, similar to the earliest use of cuneiform. They have found signs that appear only at the ends of words, suggesting grammatical endings. They have found signs that appear to be logograms, symbols that stand for a whole word or concept, like the way we might draw a small house instead of writing the word house. This tells us that Linear A was a real, structured, complex writing system. It was not random, it was not decorative. It was a tool built for thinking and communication. But the language it was built for has vanished. The Minoan civilization collapsed or transformed around 1450 BC, when Mycenaean Greeks from the mainland appear to have taken control of Crete. The Minoans, as a distinct culture, faded. Their language stopped being spoken, or was spoken by fewer and fewer people, until the last speakers died and took their mother tongue with them into the earth. There is a theory, a hopeful one, that the Minoan language might be related to the language of ancient Lemnos, a Greek island, where a short inscription was found in the 19th century. This language, called Lemnian, is also undeciphered. It also seems to be a language isolate, meaning it has no known relatives. And some linguists believe Lemnian and Minoan might be distantly related. But this connection, if it exists, has not unlocked either language. Two mysteries, possibly siblings, keeping each other company in the dark. There is something quietly poignant about that. Two forgotten languages, related perhaps, both silent, both waiting. Like two old books in a library that no one can read, shelved side by side, their spines facing outward in letters no one living can recognize. You do not have to be sad about this. Sadness is not quite the right feeling. What I would suggest instead is something softer, something more like reverence, like the feeling you get in a very old church or a very old forest, where you understand that you are a small and recent thing in a very large and very old world. We are not the first to think carefully and speak carefully and write carefully. We are not the first to try to preserve our thoughts beyond a single lifetime. The Minoans tried, the Harappans tried, the people of the Indus Valley tried. They left their marks. And we are here, listening, even if we cannot fully hear. Let that thought settle around you like a blanket, like something warm and quiet. You are part of a very long line of beings who wanted to communicate, who wanted to be understood. You belong to that line. And right now, in this moment, you are understood. You are heard. You are safe. The night is quiet. The mysteries are old and patient, and you do not need to do anything right now except breathe slowly and let the story carry you further. Chapter 5. Letters from the Edge of the World. There is a place at the far western edge of the Mediterranean world, at the narrow place where the sea meets the Atlantic. Ocean, where ancient sailors believed the world ended, that was ruled for a time by a great city. That city was Carthage. Carthage was founded by Phoenician traders, most likely in the 9th century BC, on the coast of what is now Tunisia in North Africa. It became one of the most powerful cities in the ancient world. Its merchants controlled trade across the western Mediterranean. Its navy was formidable. Its culture was rich and complex and distinctly its own. The Phoenicians and the Carthaginians who descended from them had a writing system. A good one. A practical one. In fact, the Phoenician alphabet is one of the most important writing systems ever created, because it is the direct ancestor of most alphabets used in the world today. Greek, Latin, Arabic, Hebrew, all of them trace their roots back to the Phoenician alphabet. So the Phoenicians are not our mystery tonight. Not entirely. But at the edges of the Phoenician world, in Spain, in Sardinia, in corners of the ancient Mediterranean that Phoenician traders visited but did not fully control, there were other peoples. Peoples with their own languages, and sometimes those peoples borrowed the Phoenician script to write their own language. In the south of Spain, there was a culture that left behind a series of inscriptions in a script based on Phoenician letters. This language is called Tartessian, named after a place called Tartessos that ancient Greeks wrote about, a rich, distant land of silver and mystery at the edge of the known. World. Tartessian inscriptions have been found carved on stone slabs, many of them appearing to mark burial sites. There are about 90 known inscriptions, spread across southwestern Portugal and southern Spain. And while researchers have made progress in understanding the script, the letters can be identified because they are borrowed from Phoenician. The language itself remains mysterious. It does not match any other known language from the region. It may be related to ancient Basque, the language of the Basque people of northern Spain and southern France, which is itself famously a language isolate with no known relatives. Or it may not be related to Basque at all. This is debated. What we know is that Tartessian represents a real language, spoken by real people, in a place and time that ancient Greeks described as almost magical. A land of great wealth, of silver rivers, of merchants who traded tin from distant Britain for the luxury goods of the Mediterranean world. Those people were real. Their language was real. Their words were carved into stone, likely to honour their dead. And we cannot read them. The stone slabs stand in museums and in the open fields of Portugal, grey and slightly weathered, their carved letters visible but opaque. Like a locked door with a keyhole you can see through. Just enough to know there is something on the other side, but not enough to make out what it is. The night is getting quieter now. Or maybe you are simply settling into the quiet. Either way, it is good. There are so many edges of the world, so many forgotten places where people lived and loved and carved their words into stone. And we are here, in the dark, listening for echoes. Tonight we go further. We go to places where the mystery is not just in the language, but in the very nature of the writing itself. Places where scholars are not sure if what they are looking at is truly a writing system or something else entirely. Places where the symbols are so old, or so strange, or so isolated, that they seem to exist outside the normal story of human communication. So breathe slowly, let your hands relax, let your thoughts drift a little. We are not in a hurry. Chapter 6. The Easter Island that wrote its own ending. There is an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean so remote that the nearest inhabited land is over 2,000 kilometers away. It is one of the most isolated places on Earth. The island is called Rapa Nui by its people. The world knows it by its European name, Easter Island, given to it by a Dutch sailor who arrived there on Easter Sunday in 1722 and could not have known how much mystery he had just stumbled upon. Most people know Easter Island for its statues. The moai, those enormous stone figures with long rectangular faces and heavy brows, standing with their backs to the sea, watching over the island. There are nearly 900 of them. They were carved from the soft volcanic rock of a single quarry, some of them reaching over 10 meters tall, some weighing more than 80 tons. We do not fully understand how they were moved. We do not fully understand why so many were built. We do not fully understand what they meant to the people who made them. But the statues are not our mystery tonight. Tonight, our mystery is something smaller. Something that fits in your hand. It is called Rongorongo. Rongorongo is a system of symbols found carved into wooden tablets on Easter Island. The tablets are small and flat, made from wood that is now very old and dark, almost black in some cases, with neat rows of tiny carved figures running across their surface. The figures are intricate. There are human shapes, bird shapes, fish shapes, plant shapes, geometric forms. They are carved with a precision and care that is immediately striking. These tablets were first noticed by Europeans in the 1860s when Catholic missionaries arrived on Rapa Nui. A French bishop named Josen wrote to the islanders asking about the tablets. By that time, most of the islanders who could read them were already gone, and this is one of the saddest parts of the story. In 1862, Peruvian slave raiders descended on Rapa Nui and kidnapped roughly 1/3 of the entire island population, including almost all of the island's chiefs, priests, and scholars. These were the people who held the knowledge of Rongorongo. They were the ones who could read it and teach it. Most of them died in Peru from disease and harsh conditions. A small number were eventually returned to the island, but they were already sick, and they died shortly after. The knowledge they carried, the ability to read Rongorongo, died with them. By the time European researchers realized what had been lost and began asking the remaining islanders about the tablets, there was almost no one left who could read them. A few elderly people said they remembered seeing the tablets read aloud, but they could only recite certain chants from memory, and it was unclear whether they were actually reading the symbols or simply reciting memorized text that happened to be associated with the tablets. This ambiguity is at the heart of the Rongorongo mystery. Is Rongorongo a true writing system, a script that encodes language sound by sound or word by word, the way our alphabet does? Or is it something else, a mnemonic device, a set of symbols used to prompt a speaker's memory rather than to encode specific words? Scholars have debated this for over 150 years. Some argue it is a true script, pointing to the clear structural patterns in the symbol sequences. Some symbols appear in consistent positions relative to others, suggesting grammatical rules. Some combinations appear repeatedly across different tablets, suggesting fixed phrases. This looks like language. Others argue that Rongorongo encodes meaning at a higher level, not the sounds of words, but the ideas behind them, a more symbolic system than a phonetic one. One scholar, Stephen Fisher, proposed in the 1990s that Rongorongo records a Polynesian creation chant, specifically a formula about cosmic creation and procreation. He argued he had partially decoded it. His work was received with interest but also with significant skepticism from other researchers, and the wider scholarly community has not accepted his decipherment as complete or confirmed. The truth is, we have very few tablets, only about 26 objects with Rongorongo text, spread across museums in Europe, the Americas, and Chile. We have no bilingual inscription. We have no living tradition of reading. We have a writing system that was used, lost, and then found again too late. There is one small, tantalizing clue that has survived. On one of the tablets, a wooden staff called the Santiago staff, there is a sequence of symbols so long and consistent that researchers believe it might represent a single extended text. The Santiago staff has over 2,000 individual glyphs carved into it. If it could be decoded, it might finally crack the whole system open, but so far it has not. It sits in the National Museum of Natural History in Santiago, Chile. Dark wood, tiny carved figures, rows and rows of patient symbols. Waiting. And somewhere in the Pacific, on that small wind-swept island, the stone faces still stand with their backs to the sea, as if they are waiting too. Chapter 7. The Proto-Cinetic Path. Let us pause for a moment and look at something that was decoded, but only partially, and only after a very long time. Because it helps us understand how slippery the line is between readable and unreadable, between found and lost. In the early 20th century, archaeologists working in the Sinai Peninsula, the triangular piece of land between Egypt and the Arabian Peninsula, found a series of inscriptions carved into rock. They were carved in a mine, or near a mine. They were carved by workers, probably semi-literate workers, who knew just enough writing to leave a mark. These inscriptions dated to around 1800 to 1500 BCE. They are called Proto-Cinetic inscriptions. They are important because they may represent the earliest known example of an alphabetic writing system, a system where each symbol represents a single sound rather than a whole word or syllable. Before the alphabet, writing systems were large and complex, with hundreds of symbols. The alphabet was a revolution, a simplification that made literacy possible for more people. Proto-Cinetic seems to be the ancestor of the Phoenician alphabet, which is the ancestor of almost every alphabet in use today, including the one you are hearing right now. So in a quiet way, these scratched marks on rock in a copper mine in the Sinai Peninsula are the grandparents of the letters in every book you have ever read. But here is the strange thing. Even though Proto-Cinetic is the ancestor of alphabets we know well, even though it is connected by a direct line to Phoenician, and then to Greek, and then to Latin, we still cannot read all of it with confidence. We can identify some of the letters by comparing them to their Phoenician descendants. We can work out the sound values of some symbols. A few short inscriptions have been tentatively read, including one that may say something like "to the lady" or a prayer to a goddess figure. But the readings are uncertain. They are educated guesses, well-reasoned guesses, but guesses nonetheless. The language beneath the symbols and the full meanings of the inscriptions remain unclear. Here is a script that changed the world, that started a chain reaction leading to every alphabet on Earth. And we still cannot fully read it. This is not a failure of scholarship, it is simply a reminder of how much information can be lost across time. A script found out of context, with no bilingual guide, in a limited number of examples, will resist even the best efforts for a very long time. Some doors do not open easily, some doors do not open at all, and sometimes the most important doors in history are the ones that stay forever slightly ajar. Chapter 8. The Darkness Beneath Proto-Elamite. Now let us go back to the ancient Middle East, back to the time before writing was common, back to the very early days when human civilization was just beginning to organize itself into cities and systems and records. In the land east of Mesopotamia, in what is now Iran, there was a culture called Elam. The Elamites were contemporaries of the Sumerians, the people who invented cuneiform in Mesopotamia. They traded with them, fought with them, influenced them, and were influenced by them. And the Elamites had writing too. Several kinds, actually. One of those kinds is called Proto-Elamite. Proto-Elamite is, in terms of sheer quantity, one of the largest undeciphered scripts in the world. There are over 5,000 Proto-Elamite tablets known to exist. 5,000 individual records pressed into clay covering what appear to be administrative and economic transactions, inventories, rations, records of animals and workers. This is not a small sample. 5,000 tablets is a substantial body of text. And yet, Proto-Elamite remains undeciphered. Part of the challenge is the nature of the script itself. Proto-Elamite was used from roughly 3100 to 2900 BCE, making it one of the oldest writing systems we know of, roughly contemporary with the earliest Sumerian cuneiform. But unlike cuneiform, Proto-Elamite does not seem to have evolved into a more refined and readable system. It was used for about 200 years, then abandoned in favour of a later Elamite script that was eventually decoded with the help of multilingual inscriptions. So Proto-Elamite is an orphan, no descendants, no bilingual guide, no continuous tradition of use that might have left us clues. Researchers have tried to approach it through what they know of later Elamite and through the structure of the tablets, which appear similar in format to Sumerian. Administrative tablets. They can identify what appear to be number signs, commodity signs, and personal name markers. They can look at the layout and guess at general meaning. This tablet probably records a grain ration, this one probably counts livestock. But they cannot read the actual words. They cannot tell us the name of the person who pressed these signs into wet clay more than 5,000 years ago. They cannot tell us what city this record came from, or what the commodity was called in the Elamite language of that time. 5,000 tablets. 5,000 voices. All speaking at once, all saying something specific and real. And we hear only a low murmur. There is a project, started in recent years, that is using digital imaging, including reflectance transformation imaging, a technique that captures a surface from multiple light angles to reveal details invisible to the naked eye, to study Proto-Elamite tablets more closely than ever before. Every mark, every slight variation in symbol shape, every detail that might hold a clue is being captured and analysed. This is slow work, patient work, the kind of work that might take a generation. But it is being done. Somewhere, right now, a researcher is looking at a 5,000-year-old clay tablet under a specialised light, turning it slowly, squinting at marks made by a human hand that has been dust for 50 centuries. That image, if you let it sit in your mind, is a very beautiful one. The present leaning gently toward the past. Trying to hear. Maybe that is what all of history is, really. The present leaning toward the past. Listening for something it almost understands. And maybe that is what you are doing right now. In the dark, with this story. Listening for something. Letting the old world wash quietly over you. That is more than enough. Chapter 9. A pause for the body and the breath. You have travelled a long way tonight. From the Indus Valley to Easter Island. From the spiralling disc of Phaistos to the copper mines of Sinai. From clay tablets in Iran to wooden boards in the Pacific. You have held many mysteries, and now if you would like, you can set them down for a moment. Let your body feel the surface beneath you, the mattress or the cushion or the couch. Feel how it supports you completely without asking anything in return. You do not have to do anything to be held by it. You simply have to be still. Let your breath go a little slower, not forced, just allowed. In and out. In and out. The symbols are all around you, in a quiet way. Every word you have ever read, every letter you have ever written, every text message and grocery list and birthday card, all of it descends from marks made in clay and stone by people who had no idea their marks would outlast their empires. Your words matter too. Everything you have ever said to someone who needed to hear it. every note you left, every time you put your thoughts into words, these things matter in ways you may never fully know. You are part of the long, unbroken human practice of trying to communicate. Even in sleep, even in dreams, you are still reaching towards something. And it is reaching back. Chapter 10. The Undeciphered Voice of the Olmec. Now let us cross an ocean. Let us go west, far west, past the Pacific, past the long blue stretch of open water, to the Americas, to a land of rainforests and volcanoes and wide river plains, to the Gulf Coast of what is now Mexico. Here, between roughly 1500 and 400 BC, the first complex civilization of Mesoamerica rose and flourished and eventually faded. They are called the Olmec. We do not know what they called themselves. Olmec is a name given to them by the Aztec people centuries later, and it means roughly the rubber people, because the region they lived in was rich in rubber trees. The Olmec are sometimes called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. This is because so many of the cultural and artistic traditions of later Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Maya and the Aztec, seem to have roots in Olmec practice. The ball game played across Mesoamerica for thousands of years. The sacred calendar, the imagery of the feathered serpent, the use of jade as a prestige material. Many of these seem to trace back to the Olmec. The Olmec are famous today for one thing above all others: their colossal stone heads. These are massive basalt sculptures of human faces, round, flat-nosed, thick-lipped faces, each wearing a helmet-like headdress. There are 17 known colossal heads. The largest is over 3 meters tall and weighs more than 40 tons. Each face is slightly different, and many researchers believe they are portraits of actual Olmec rulers. The basalt for these heads was quarried from mountains 80 to 100 kilometers away. It was moved, somehow, across rivers and wetlands and jungle terrain, without the wheel, without metal tools, without draft animals. We do not know exactly how. These things were possible. We know they were possible because they were done, but the details are lost, and the Olmec may have had writing. In 2002, a stone block was found at the site of Cascajal in the state of Veracruz, Mexico. It had a flat surface covered in 62 symbols that some researchers believe represent the earliest known writing in the Americas, possibly dating to before 900 BC. This is called the Cascajal block. The symbols on the Cascajal block do not clearly match any other known Mesoamerican writing system. They are arranged in rows, and they include a mix of geometric shapes and more pictorial figures. Some symbols appear multiple times, suggesting a structured system rather than random markings. But the Cascajal block has only been found once. There are no other examples of this specific script. There is no bilingual inscription. There is nothing to compare it to. Some scholars accept it as writing. Others are more cautious, suggesting it could be a non-linguistic symbol system. The debate continues, and so the Olmec, who may have been the first people in the Americas to write, have left us a possible message we cannot read, in a script we cannot identify, on a single stone block found by chance during construction work in a small Mexican town. One block. 62 symbols. A possible first word from an entire civilization. And we cannot understand it. There is something almost unbearably poignant about that. 62 small marks on a dark stone, pressed into the material world at some point in the centuries before Rome was founded, before the Buddha walked, before the first Olympic. Games were held in Greece. A first attempt at saying something that has lasted thousands of years. And we are still trying to hear it. Chapter 11. When even the experts disagree. One of the things that makes undeciphered scripts so fascinating and so genuinely uncertain is that even the world's best, experts do not always agree on what they are looking at. We have already seen this with Rongorongo. Is it a true writing system or a mnemonic device? Scholars disagree. We have seen it with the Cascajal block. Is it writing or symbolic marking? Scholars disagree. And there are other cases. There is the linear Elamite script, different from Proto-Elamite, used later and by a more developed Elamite civilization, which was announced as possibly decoded in 2022, generating enormous excitement in archaeological circles. The researchers who announced the decipherment claimed to have identified sound values for many of the signs, and they proposed readings for several inscriptions. But other scholars looked at the same evidence and expressed significant skepticism. The proposed readings, they argued, relied on assumptions that were not yet proven. The methodology was questioned. The claims were considered preliminary at best. This is not scandal. This is how scholarship works. Slowly, carefully, with disagreement and revision and long years of re-examination. The honest truth about decipherment is that it is hard, genuinely hard, not just because the scripts are old and damaged and limited in quantity, but because language itself is strange and slippery. The same symbol can mean different things in different contexts. A sound value that works for one inscription may not work for another. When Michael Ventris decoded Linear B in 1952, it felt like a sudden breakthrough. But he had been working on it for years. He had mountains of careful data. He had the collaboration of other sharp minds. He had the specific advantage of knowing that Linear B was used in the same general region as Mycenaean Greek culture, which narrowed his search significantly. Most undeciphered scripts do not offer those advantages. Most undeciphered scripts are lonely. Isolated. Without neighbours or relatives or context. And so they wait, patient as stone, patient as clay, and we circle them slowly, with our questions and our methods and our careful instruments, trying every angle, looking for the crack of light that might let us in. It is patient work. It is humbling work. And there is something quietly beautiful about the fact that people choose to do it, that there are human beings alive right now who have dedicated their careers, their whole working lives, to listening for a voice that may never speak clearly. That kind of dedication, that kind of love for the past, is its own form of grace. Chapter 12. The Sleeping Room of Symbols. Imagine, for a moment, a museum at night. The lights are off, or nearly off. There are small safety lights near the floor, casting a dim orange glow along the corridors. The cases and displays are dim shapes in the dark. The air is cool and controlled, carefully maintained to preserve the objects inside. In one case, a small stone seal from the Indus Valley sits on a cushion of archival foam. A bull carved in careful relief, and above it, 7 symbols in a row. In another case, a clay tablet from ancient Iran rests under protective glass. Rows of pressed symbols cover its surface. Numbers, possibly. Names, possibly. Something specific that someone needed to record 5,000 years ago. Down the corridor, a fragment of a wooden board, too fragile to touch, carries the faint traces of carved Rongorongo glyphs. The wood is so old, it is nearly black. In a separate room, the Phaistos Disc sits behind thick glass in its own dedicated display. Under soft directional lighting, its spiral of symbols is clearly visible. Visitors stand before it during the day and take photographs and read the explanatory card and walk away slightly baffled, slightly moved, slightly uncertain what they feel. At night, in the quiet, these objects exist in their own time. They are not waiting for us, exactly. They do not need us. They have their own completeness. Their meaning is locked inside them the way music is locked inside a closed instrument. The instrument is not incomplete. The music is simply not yet being played. And maybe that is the most peaceful way to think about all of this. These scripts are not broken. They are not failed attempts at communication. They are complete in themselves. They held meaning once. real and specific meaning for real and specific people. That meaning is simply no longer accessible to us. And maybe it is enough, more than enough, to know that it was there. To know that people wrote, that they tried, that they had things worth saying. To know that the desire to communicate, to leave a mark, to be understood, this desire is as old as civilization itself, as old as the first city, as old as the first seal pressed into soft clay by a human hand that was warm and alive and thinking about what needed to be remembered. That desire runs through all of us, still. It is running through you, right now, in this quiet moment. In the dark. In the warm. At the edge of sleep. You are part of this long, unbroken line of beings who wanted to speak and be heard. And tonight, at least, you have been heard. Rest now. Let the symbols drift. Let the tablets settle into their deep museum quiet. The story continues, where we will travel to the highlands of Central America, to the stone corridors of a civilization that had its own undeciphered mysteries, and to places even further and stranger than the ones we have visited tonight. If you have been here from the beginning, then you have already travelled very far. You have walked through the streets of the ancient Indus Valley. You have looked at the spiral of the Phaistos Disc. You have stood on Easter Island in the wind. You have held clay tablets from Iran in your mind, gently, the way you might hold something very old and very fragile. And if you are joining for the first time tonight, welcome. You do not need to know everything that came before. The story will carry you from here. Get comfortable. Adjust the pillow if you need to. Let your arms rest heavy at your sides. Let your legs stop holding any tension they have been carrying all day. We are going back into the quiet. And tonight, the quiet goes very deep. Chapter 13. The Green World That Wrote in Stone. There is a place in southern Mexico and northern Central America where the jungle grows so dense that it can swallow entire cities. Not slowly, not politely, but completely. Roots push through stone floors. Vines wind around carved columns. Trees grow directly out of the tops of temples, their roots running down the sides like slow, patient fingers, prying the stones apart over centuries. This is the world of the ancient Maya. And in this green, humid, bird-filled world, one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the ancient Americas built cities, observed the stars, developed mathematics, and created a writing system of extraordinary complexity and beauty. The Maya writing system is called Mayan hieroglyphics, or sometimes simply the Maya script. It consists of hundreds of individual signs, some representing whole words, some representing syllables, some representing both, depending on context. The signs can be written in different ways, stacked, merged, combined, in a kind of visual grammar that is unlike almost anything else ever created. And for a long time, for most of the 20th century, it was considered undecipherable. It was not undeciphered because there were no examples. There were thousands. The Maya carved their script into stone monuments called stelae, tall, upright stones covered in text and imagery. They painted it in books called codices, made from bark paper. They carved it into the lintels and walls of their temples and palaces. It was undeciphered because the scholars of the early 20th century made incorrect assumptions about how it worked. They assumed, wrongly, that the script was purely logographic, that each sign stood for a word or concept, not a sound. And because they were looking for a logographic system, they could not see the phonetic system hiding inside it. The real breakthrough came slowly, through the work of several researchers over several decades. A Russian linguist named Yuri Neurosov, working in the 1950s and 1960s, argued that the script was partly phonetic, that some signs represented syllables. He was dismissed and criticised for years, partly because of Cold War politics that made Western scholars reluctant to accept the work of a Soviet researcher. But he was right. Eventually, building on Neurosov's work and on the contributions of many others, including Tatiana Proskuriakov, who in 1960 demonstrated that the stelae recorded real historical events and real historical people, scholars cracked the Maya script. By the 1980s and 1990s, the system was largely understood, and today trained epigraphers can read Maya inscriptions with reasonable confidence. So the Maya script is not one of our mysteries tonight. Not anymore. But the Maya world does give us mysteries. Because the Maya were not the only civilization in their region, and not every writing system from ancient Mesoamerica has been decoded. There is one in particular that remains stubbornly, beautifully, infuriatingly silent. Chapter 14. The Zapotec Question. South of the Maya world, in the highlands of the Mexican state of Oaxaca, lived another ancient civilization, the Zapotec people. The Zapotec built a great city on a flattened mountaintop they called Monte Alban. This city was occupied continuously from roughly 500 B to around 700 C, more than 1,000 years of continuous habitation in a place that commanded sweeping views of the 3 valleys below. Monte Alban was a centre of political power, religious ceremony, and intellectual life. It had temples, plazas, ball courts, an astronomical observatory, and elaborate tombs where the Zapotec buried their rulers with jade and pottery and precious offerings. And Monte Alban had writing. The Zapotec script is one of the oldest writing systems in the Americas. Inscriptions have been found dating to as early as 500 BC, predating most other Mesoamerican scripts. These early inscriptions were carved on large stone slabs, most famously on a set of slabs called the danzantes, or dancers, which line the base of a platform at Monte Alban. The danzantes are striking. They show human figures in unusual contorted poses, some with closed eyes, some with what appear to be signs of injury or death. Many researchers believe they depict captives taken in war, possibly being displayed as trophies of conquest. Around and between the figures are carved symbols, glyphs that appear to be names, dates, or captions. These symbols are part of the Zapotec script. And the Zapotec script has not been fully decoded. There has been more progress here than with some other scripts on our list tonight. Scholars have identified signs that represent calendar dates. The Zapotec, like other Mesoamerican civilizations, used a complex calendrical system, and many inscriptions seem to record specific dates. Some researchers have proposed readings for certain name glyphs and place glyphs, but the script as a whole, the full range of its signs and their meanings, is not yet understood. The language beneath the script, ancient Zapotec, is related to modern Zapotec languages still spoken in Oaxaca today, which gives researchers a valuable foothold. But the ancient and modern forms are separated by centuries of change, and the connection does not unlock the script the way one might hope. There are also relatively few long inscriptions. Like several other scripts on our list, Zapotec texts tend to be short, a few signs, a date, a name, a caption. Long readable narrative texts are rare, and so the danzantes stand at Monte Alban, in the warm mountain air, their carved figures still contorted, their surrounding glyphs still largely silent, under a sky that has not changed in 2,500 years. The city is open to visitors now. You can walk through the broad plazas and stand at the edges of the platforms and look out over the 3 valleys. On a clear day, the view is extraordinary, warm and wide and ancient. And somewhere in that view, in the stones beneath your feet and the carved walls around you, there are words. Specific words. Words someone chose carefully at a specific moment in history to record something that mattered. And we still cannot read them. The mountain keeps its secrets with a kind of majestic patience. Chapter 15. A small rest in the deep dark. You have been travelling for a long time tonight. Through jungles and deserts and across wide oceans, through museums and ruins and the quiet interiors of ancient cities. And perhaps, right now, you are very nearly asleep. That is good. That is exactly right. Let the images soften a little. Let the stone faces and carved tablets blur at the edges, the way things do when sleep is coming. You do not need to hold on to any of this clearly. The information will still be there when you come back to it. The mysteries will still be waiting. For now, just notice how your body feels against the surface you are lying on. Heavy. Warm. Still. Notice the quality of the air in the room. Whether it is cool or warm, whether it smells of anything familiar. Notice the darkness behind your eyelids. How it is not really empty, it has a texture, a depth. Like the ocean surface at night, which looks flat and black from above, but contains within it enormous, living, moving depths. You are like that too. Whatever is happening on the surface of your thoughts, the shapes of old scripts, the names of ancient peoples, the image of a clay tablet in a museum case, below all of that, there is something very still, very deep, very quiet. That stillness is yours. It is always there. And right now, you can rest in it. Breathe out slowly and let the next chapter come to you softly, like light through water, easy and slow. Chapter 16. The Bronze Age collapses, and language goes with it. Now here is something that many people do not fully appreciate about the ancient world. There was a moment in history, roughly around 1200 BC, when the Bronze Age Mediterranean world came very close to collapsing entirely. Not slowly, not gradually, but within the span of a few decades, some of the most powerful civilizations of the ancient world fell apart simultaneously. The Mycenaean Greeks, who had great palace complexes at Mycenae and Tiryns and Pylos, saw their palaces burned and abandoned. The Hittite Empire, centered in what is now Turkey, collapsed almost overnight. The great cosmopolitan city of Ugarit on the Syrian coast was destroyed and never rebuilt. Egypt survived but was severely weakened. Trade networks that had connected the entire Mediterranean world for centuries, networks carrying copper and tin and grain and oil and luxury goods from one culture to another, these networks broke down completely. Archaeologists and historians call this the Bronze Age collapse, and to this day its exact causes are debated. There may have been climate change. There may have been drought. There may have been invasions by groups the Egyptians called the Sea Peoples. There may have been internal rebellions. Most likely it was all of these things at once, a cascade of disasters arriving too quickly for any civilization to absorb. And when these civilizations fell, their writing systems fell with them. The Mycenaean Greeks had been using Linear B, as we discussed in Part 1. When the Mycenaean palaces collapsed, Linear B disappeared. The administrative machinery that had used it, the palace officials, the record keepers, the scribes, vanished with the palace system. For several centuries, Greece had no writing at all. When writing returned to Greece around 800 BC, it was in the form of the Phoenician-derived alphabet, a completely new system unrelated to Linear B. This is what the Bronze Age collapse did to knowledge. It erased it. It broke the chain of transmission. It left silences where there had been voices. And in some cases it left writing systems that no one could read anymore, because the people who used them were gone. One of those writing systems is Cypro-Minoan. Chapter 17. Cypro-Minoan and the Island Between Worlds. The island of Cyprus sits in the eastern Mediterranean, roughly equidistant from Turkey, Syria, Lebanon and Egypt. For thousands of years it has been a crossroads, a place where traders and travellers from different cultures meet and exchange and mix. Cyprus was also home to one of the richest copper deposits in the ancient world. The word copper, in fact, may derive from the name Cyprus, Kypros, in Greek. which became cuprum in Latin, which became copper in English. The island was so associated with the metal that the metal took the island's name. In the late Bronze Age, roughly 1550 to 1050 BC, Cyprus was a prosperous and cosmopolitan place. Its cities were home to Cypriots, Mycenaean Greeks, Canaanites, Egyptians and others. Goods and ideas flowed through its ports, and during this period, Cyprus had its own writing system. It is called Cypro-Minoan. The name suggests a connection to Minoan Linear A, and indeed it seems likely that Cypro-Minoan developed from Linear A, or at least was significantly influenced by it. The two scripts share some similar looking signs. About 250 inscriptions in Cypro-Minoan have been found, on clay tablets, on clay cylinders, on ceramic vessels, on a copper ingot, and on several other objects. The inscriptions date from roughly 1550 to 1050 BC. And then, around 1050 BC, right after the Bronze Age collapse, Cypro-Minoan disappears. It is replaced by a later script called the Cypriot syllabary, which was used in the first millennium BC and has been decoded. The Cypriot syllabary records an early form of Greek, but Cypro-Minoan, the earlier script, has not been decoded. The language it recorded is unknown. It may record an unknown language that was spoken in Cyprus before the Greek speakers arrived. It may record an early form of a language from the Levant, the region of modern Lebanon and Israel. It may record the Minoan language, suggesting that Minoan speakers travelled to Cyprus. We do not know. There have been serious attempts at decipherment. A French scholar named Emilia Masson worked on it for many years in the mid-20th century, identifying some patterns. More recently, a 2022 study by Silvia Ferrara and Miguel Valrio made claims of a partial decipherment, identifying some sound values and proposing that one inscription might record a name, possibly Phaistos, a Greek name, suggesting that at least some Cypro-Minoan texts may record Greek after all. But these proposals remain contested, and the full script remains undeciphered. Cyprus, the island of copper and crossroads, holds one more secret in its ancient stones. The eastern Mediterranean sun beats down on Cypriot ruins, warm and yellow and indifferent to mystery. Tourists walk through excavated Bronze Age cities, past the foundations of houses that were occupied for 1,000 years, past the ghost streets of a cosmopolitan world that vanished suddenly in the chaos of 1200 BC, and somewhere in a museum case, a small clay tablet with neat rows of Cypro-Minoan signs waits patiently, as it has waited for 3,000 years. Chapter 18. The Meroitic Enigma. Let us go south now. South from the Mediterranean, down through Egypt, following the Nile as it flows northward from its ancient sources in the heart of Africa. South of Egypt, in what is now Sudan, there was a civilization that lasted for more than 1,000 years. They are called the Meroitic civilization, or sometimes the Kingdom of Kush. Their capital city was Miro, situated in the dry savanna south of the Nile's fifth cataract, a place of wide skies and flat plains and scattered acacia trees. The Meroitic civilization was in many ways influenced by Egypt. They adopted Egyptian artistic styles. They built pyramid-shaped tombs for their rulers, smaller and steeper than Egyptian pyramids, but clearly descended from them. They worshipped some Egyptian gods alongside their own. But they were not Egyptian. They had their own culture, their own rulers, their own religious traditions, and they had their own writing system. The Meroitic script is one of the oldest alphabets in Africa. It was derived from Egyptian hieroglyphics, but adapted to work as a true alphabet, with individual signs representing individual sounds. It was used from roughly 300 BC to 400 C, a period of about 7 centuries. And the remarkable thing about the Meroitic script is that it has been decoded. The sound values of the signs are known. Scholars can read Meroitic text out loud, transliterating it into recognizable sounds. But the language, the actual Meroitic language, the language those sounds belonged to, remains largely unknown. This is a peculiar and frustrating situation. Imagine being able to read a text aloud perfectly, pronouncing every word correctly, but having no idea what any of the words mean. That is the situation with Meroitic. Scholars can say this inscription begins with these sounds, in this order. They can identify repeated phrases that appear to be religious formulas or titles. They can identify personal names because names often appear in consistent positions in tomb inscriptions. They can guess at some words based on comparison with other African languages, particularly Old Nubian, a language that was written down several centuries after Meroitic and May. Be distantly related. But the core vocabulary, the grammar, the full meaning of most inscriptions, these remain opaque. There are hundreds of Meroitic inscriptions, many of them on tomb walls and funerary stelae, upright stone markers placed at graves. These inscriptions were likely prayers or blessings for the dead, formulas intended to help the deceased in the afterlife. Real prayers. Specific words chosen for specific people who lived and died in the warm savannah south of Egypt between 2000 and 1600 years ago. And we cannot understand them. We can hear the sounds of these prayers, we can hear the consonants and vowels, roughly, but the meaning slips away. It is like hearing someone pray in a language you almost know. You can tell it is prayer, the tone is clear, the repetition is clear, the devotion is clear, but the specific words, the specific names of the gods being addressed, the specific comfort being asked for, these are lost. The Meroitic pyramids still stand in Sudan, in the desert outside the modern town of Miro. They are steep and slightly eroded, their stone yellowed by heat and time. Some of them were broken open by a European treasure hunter in the 19th century, who was looking for gold and found mostly pottery and bones. But on their walls, in the cool stone interiors, the prayers are still there, still carved, still trying to reach whatever they were reaching toward, still almost readable. Almost. Chapter 19. The letter we almost understand. There is a particular feeling that comes with almost understanding. You have felt it before. It might come when you overhear a conversation in a language that is close to one you know, close enough that some words jump out at you, but not close enough to follow the whole thing, or when you read an old letter in old-fashioned handwriting, where you can make out most words but some are just blurs of ink that will not resolve into meaning no matter how long you stare at them. There is a kind of gentle frustration in it, not anguish, just a softness, an ache, the feeling of something almost within reach. That feeling is what the study of undeciphered scripts is full of. And what I find most moving about it, what I want to sit with for a moment, here in the quiet of tonight, is the way it makes the past feel present. When we cannot read an inscription, we cannot turn it into information. We cannot extract it from its context and put it into a database and file it away. It stays alive in its original form, a real object, a real mark, made by a real hand. In a strange way, the undeciphered scripts are more present to us than the decoded ones, because we cannot translate them into modern language and move on. We have to stay with them. We have to look at them longer. We have to hold the uncertainty. We have to sit with not knowing. And in that sitting, something happens. A kind of quiet attention opens up. A kind of respect. The inscription becomes not a puzzle to be solved, but a presence to be acknowledged. There was a person here. There was a thought here. There was a moment, real and specific, when a human hand pressed a mark into a surface and the mark stayed. That is extraordinary, no matter whether we understand the mark or not. You are doing something right now that is not so different. You are lying in the dark. Your mind is moving through images and thoughts. You are present, in this moment, in this body, in this night. And this moment is real as the Indus Valley seal, as real as the spiral of the Phaistos Disc. It will not last forever in the same form. Nothing does. But it is here now, and it is enough. Chapter 20. The Language the Sky Kept. Let us end Part 3 in a place that feels different from all the others. Not a city, not a palace, not a mine or a temple or a tomb. Let us end in the open air. In the high Andes of South America, in what is now Peru and Bolivia, there lived for centuries a people who developed a remarkable system for recording information. They did not use stone, they did not use clay, they did not use bark paper, they used string. The Inca system of knotted cords is called a quipu, from the Quechua word for knot. A quipu is made of a main cord, often horizontal, from which hang many pendant cords. These pendant cords are knotted at various intervals, in various ways, with various numbers of knots, and in various colours of dyed fibre. The Inca used quipus to record numbers, census data, tribute amounts, astronomical observations, military records. The numerical system encoded in quipus has been deciphered, and it turns out to be a base 10 positional system, remarkably similar in structure to the decimal number system we use today. But researchers have long suspected that quipus may record more than numbers, that some quipus may record narrative, stories, histories, poems, ritual texts. If they do, that part has not been decoded. In 2017, a study of a particular set of quipus from a village called San Juan de Coyata in Peru found a small group of quipus that seemed to be constructed differently from numerical quipus. The structures were more complex, the patterns more varied. The researchers proposed that these might be narrative quipus, chord books in a sense, but reading them remains far beyond current capabilities. And here is the melancholy detail that makes the quipu story particularly poignant. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in South America in the 16th century and conquered the Inca Empire, they brought with them missionaries who were deeply suspicious of quipus. Some missionaries believed that quipus might be used to record traditional religious practices that they wanted to suppress. There were burnings, not of books exactly, but of the cords that may have been books. Bundles of knotted string, carefully made, carrying information that had been passed down for generations, thrown into fires. How many stories were lost in those fires? How many histories, how many prayers, how many poems tied in coloured string? We will never know. What we have left is perhaps 800 surviving quipus spread across museums around the world. Most of them are numerical, some of them might be something more. And above the Andes, the sky is very clear at night. The Inca were extraordinary astronomers, and they watched these stars for centuries. They had names for the dark patches between the stars, the dark constellations, shaped not by where the stars were, but by the shadows between them, shapes of animals and figures in the darkness itself. They read the sky in a way no other culture did, and perhaps they recorded what they read in their knotted strings. Perhaps somewhere in a museum cabinet, in a carefully preserved bundle of faded cords, there is a poem about those dark constellations. A description of the sky as seen from the Andes more than 500 years ago on a night very much like this one. Cold, clear, full of stars, full of a silence that held everything. And yes, we have made it this far. Through the Indus Valley and Easter Island, through the jungles of Mesoamerica and the high Andes, through the Bronze Age and the Copper. Mines and the knotted strings of the Inca. Then you have done something quiet and wonderful. You have kept company with the lost. You have sat with voices that cannot speak anymore. You have given your attention, your warm and patient attention, to people who lived and thought and wrote thousands of years ago and left their marks behind without knowing if anyone would ever find them. That is a generous thing. More generous than it might seem in the ordinary run of a day. So settle in once more. Let the room be whatever it is, dark or nearly dark. Let the sounds of the building or the street or the night fade into the background, the way sounds do when you stop paying close attention to them. We are going deeper now. Slower now. The information will come a little more gently in this part, and the reflections will grow a little longer. We are beginning, quietly, to turn toward home. But first, there are more mysteries, and they deserve to be told. Chapter 21. The Oracle Bones and the Edge of Knowing. In northern China during the latter part of the 2nd millennium BEC, there was a practice that was equal parts religious ritual, political consultation, and record-keeping. The people of the Shang dynasty, one of the earliest Chinese dynasties about which we have clear archaeological evidence, used bones for divination. Animal bones, usually cattle shoulder blades or the flat undershells of tortoises. These bones were prepared carefully, dried and cleaned, sometimes polished. Then a question was posed about the weather, about a coming battle, about whether the harvest would be good, about whether a royal ancestor was pleased or displeased. The bone was heated. A rod of hot bronze or burning wood was pressed against it. The heat caused cracks to form in the bone, spreading out from the point of pressure in thin branching lines. A diviner read the cracks, interpreting their direction, their length, their angle, and pronounced an answer from the spirit world. And then, often, the question and the answer were inscribed directly onto the bone itself. These inscribed bones are called oracle bones, and the script carved into them, oracle bone script, is the earliest known form of Chinese writing. Oracle bone script has been decoded, scholars can read it, and it is clearly an ancestor of modern Chinese characters. Many of the signs are recognizable, even across 3,000 years. The character for sun, for rain, for mountain, for woman, these are visible in oracle bone script as pictographic shapes that have simply become more stylized and abstract over millennia. So oracle bone script is not our mystery tonight, not fully. But it lives at the edge of our mystery, because when you look at oracle bone script, when you see those thin, careful lines scratched into yellowed bone, you are seeing something that survived only by accident. Oracle bones were forgotten for centuries. In the 19th century, farmers in Henan province were digging them up and selling them to apothecaries as dragon bones, ground up and used in traditional medicine. Think about that. The earliest known Chinese writing, the roots of a script used by more than 1 billion people today, was being ground into medicine powder and swallowed, until a scholar named Wang Yirong noticed the markings in 1899 and recognized them as writing. He began collecting the bones. Others followed. The trade in dragon bones gradually became a trade in ancient inscriptions, and oracle bone script entered the world of scholarship. How many were lost? How many inscriptions were ground to powder before anyone thought to look more closely? We will never know, and this is the quieter mystery inside the oracle bone story. Not an undeciphered script, but a reminder of how fragile the survival of ancient knowledge really is. How much depends on accident? On a scholar noticing a marking, on a farmer's field not being ploughed too deep, on a clay tablet not being stepped on. Most of ancient writing has not survived. The vast majority of what people wrote in the ancient world is gone. Rotted, burned, dissolved, ground to powder, lost in floods, buried under cities, forgotten in caves that no one found. The texts we have are the lucky ones, the survivors of an enormous attrition. Every undeciphered script we have discussed tonight is a survivor, a fragment, a small piece of something much larger that did not make it. And sitting with that, really sitting with it, produces a feeling that is not exactly sadness. It is something more like awe, a kind of vertigo, but a gentle one, like standing on a high cliff on a clear night and suddenly feeling the size of the sky. We are very small, our moment is very brief, and yet the marks we make can outlast us by thousands of years. That is strange, and beautiful, and worth noticing. Chapter 22. The Lost Languages That Were Never Written. Here is a thought that might surprise you. Most languages that have ever existed on Earth were never written down at all. Writing is actually a relatively recent technology, and for most of human history it was available only to a small number of cultures. Even within those cultures, it was often used by a small number of people: scribes, priests, officials, merchants. Most people in most ancient societies were not literate, and most languages were never given a written form. Linguists estimate that somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 languages have existed over the course of human history. Today there are roughly 7,000 languages still spoken. The vast majority of the thousands that have disappeared left no written record at all, not a single mark. They existed only in the air, in spoken breath, in conversation, in story and song and argument and lullaby. They shaped the thoughts of the people who spoke them. They contained specific ways of dividing up reality, specific metaphors for time and space, specific words for things that other languages had no word for. And then they faded. The last speaker died. The children were not taught. The language moved into silence. There are languages we know existed because they were mentioned by ancient writers, a geographer or historian referring to a people who spoke a strange tongue, but we have not. A single word of the language itself. It was never written. The ancient writer did not transcribe it, and so it is entirely gone. How many ways of saying I love you have been lost? How many words for specific qualities of light, or specific feelings that had no equivalent in other languages, or specific ways of talking about the relationship between a person and their ancestors? We cannot count them. We cannot even guess at their shapes. There is a concept in linguistics called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, the idea that the language you speak shapes the way you think, that different languages do not just label the same underlying reality differently, but actually create different ways of experiencing reality. If this is even partly true, then every lost language is not just a lost communication system. It is a lost way of experiencing the world, a lost lens. And the languages we cannot decipher are in a sense the most visible edge of this enormous invisible loss. They are the ones who almost made it. They left their marks. They reached through time with their symbols and their careful structure. But the meaning is just out of reach, just beyond what we can hear. Chapter 23. The Ones Who Tried. Let us spend a moment with the people who have tried to decode these scripts. The human beings who chose to dedicate their working lives, sometimes their whole adult lives, to the patient work of listening for voices that may never speak clearly. Michael Ventris was an architect who decoded Linear B in 1952. He was 30 years old when he announced the breakthrough. He died in a car accident 4 years later. He never saw the full flowering of the field he had helped open. Alice Kober was a classic scholar who worked on Linear B before Ventris, laying much of the groundwork he built upon, identifying patterns in the script, creating careful tables of sign relationships. She worked obsessively on index cards in the years after World War II. She died in 1950, 2 years before the decipherment, of cancer. She never knew her work had been essential. Yuri Neurosov was the linguist who cracked the Maya script, working in Leningrad in the 1950s with almost no access to Western scholarship and no way to travel to the actual Maya sites. He used a book of Maya texts that had been brought to the Soviet Union from a bombed-out German library at the end of the war. He was dismissed for decades. He was eventually vindicated. He died in 1999, having lived to see his work accepted. These are not just stories of intellectual triumph. They are stories of patience, of faith in the work itself, even when the work seemed to be going nowhere, of willingness to sit with not knowing for years, for decades, trusting that careful attention would eventually find a crack of light. And there are others, people working right now, tonight, somewhere in the world. A researcher in London studying Proto-Elamite tablets through a computer screen. A linguist in Mexico City analysing Zapotec inscriptions in an archive. A team in Germany running statistical analyses on the Indus Script, looking for patterns that might reveal its structure. They are sitting with the silence, just as we are sitting with it tonight, in their own way, in their own time. What they share with you right now in this quiet moment is the willingness to pay attention, to not turn away from the mystery, to stay with it, even when it does not give up its answer. That is a form of love, I think. A quiet, serious, long-lasting form of love. Chapter 24. The Sleep Reset and the Space Between. Before we continue, let us pause here, in the gentle space between chapters. Let the stories settle. Let the names drift. Ventris, Koba, Norosov, like names written in sand near the water, still there, but softening at the edges. Feel the weight of your body right now, the specific weight of your head against the pillow, the way your shoulders have let go of the day, the small warm heaviness of your hands. There is a word in Japanese, ma, which means the pause, the space between things, the silence between musical notes, the gap between two trees, the moment between one breath and the next. Ma is not emptiness, it is presence of a different kind. It is the space that allows things to be heard, to be felt, to land. Right now, you are in a kind of ma. In the space between the stories, in the pause between one ancient mystery and the next. There is nothing you need to do in this space, except be in it. Notice how the room feels, how the darkness has a kind of quality to it, a texture, how the sounds around you, whatever they are, have receded into background, like music heard from several rooms away. You are here, you are breathing, you are safe. The stories will continue when you are ready, and if sleep comes first, then sleep is the right thing. Let the space hold you, let the ma do its quiet work, and when the next words come, let them come softly, like a hand placed gently on a sleeping shoulder. Chapter 25. The Writing in the Rock. There is a type of ancient mark that exists on almost every continent on Earth, on cave walls in France and Spain, 20,000 years old, on cliff faces in the American Southwest, carved by people who lived there long before European contact, on rock surfaces in the Sahara Desert, in Australia, in Scandinavia, in India, in South Africa. These marks are called petroglyphs, from the Greek words for rock and carving. They include animals, human figures, geometric shapes, handprints, spirals, grids, dots, lines and forms that resist easy categorization. Some of these petroglyphs may be art, pure visual expression, with no linguistic intention, the same impulse that drives a person to doodle in the margins of a notebook, the same impulse that drives a child to draw. On a foggy window, some may be maps, or calendars, or hunting records, and some, particularly the more systematized and repeated groupings, may be something closer to proto-writing. Symbolic systems with consistent meanings used to communicate specific information, even if they do not encode language directly. We do not know, in most cases, which is which. The oldest petroglyphs predate any writing system we know of by tens of thousands of years. They come from a time when language itself, spoken language, may have been relatively young, or at least much more limited than it later became, and yet the impulse behind them is recognizable. The desire to make a mark. To say, I was here, I saw this is what I knew. There is a set of petroglyphs in the Lascaux cave system in France, famous for its extraordinary paintings of horses and bulls and deer, that include some abstract symbols. Scattered among the animal images, dots and lines and rectangular grid like shapes that appear consistently in cave art across Europe. Some researchers have proposed that these abstract symbols constitute a kind of Paleolithic writing, not a full linguistic script, but a system with consistent conventions. Used to record information about animal behaviour, seasons, migrations. If this is right, the first attempts at writing were not made 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. They were made 30,000 years ago, in the flickering orange light of oil lamps, deep inside caves in France, by people who thought carefully about what they saw, who wanted to preserve it, who made marks on stone walls that are still there, still visible, still being studied by researchers who lie on the cave floor with flashlights, looking up at ancient paintings, in the same posture you might be in right now, lying on their backs, looking up at something old and beautiful and not fully understood, breathing slowly, trying to hear. Chapter 26. What the Silence Says. We have travelled a long way through this part of the story, and I want to spend some time now not with any specific script, but with what all of these scripts, taken together, might be trying to tell us. Not what the symbols mean, we do not know that, but what their existence means, what the fact of them, the sheer patient reality of them, might be saying to us, tonight, in the dark. Here is one thought. Every script we have discussed was created by people who believed their words were worth preserving, not just worth saying aloud in the moment, but worth pressing into clay, carving into stone, painting onto bark paper, tying into knotted string. Worth the effort of making permanent. This is not a small thing. Making something permanent takes effort. It takes materials and tools and skill. It takes the belief that what you have to say is important enough to survive the moment of saying it. Every one of these people believed that. The Harappan merchant pressing a seal into soft clay believed that the message on the seal, whatever it was worth preserving at least long enough to accompany a shipment of goods to a distant city. The Minoan scribe inscribing a linear tablet believed that the record being kept, whatever it was, mattered enough to write down. The person who carved the Phaistos Disc believed that what was written on it, whatever it was, deserved to be pressed into clay in a spiral that would carry the reader from the outside to the centre, or from the centre outward, in a journey that felt intentional and meaningful. Every single one of them believed their words mattered. And here is the thing. They were right. Not because we can read the words. We cannot. But because those words, in their mysterious silence, have crossed thousands of years and arrived in this moment, in this room, in the quiet of this particular night, and caused you to think about the people who made them. They reached you. Not with their meaning, but with their presence. Not with their content, but with their effort. And that is a kind of communication. A strange, broken, incomplete kind, but real. As real as anything. The message that crossed the millennia is not the message that was intended. The intended message is lost, but the unintended message, I was here, I had something to say, I tried, that message arrived perfectly. That message is as clear as anything, and when you think of your own life, the things you say, the messages you send, the words you leave for people, it is worth remembering this. The meaning you intend may not be the only meaning that arrives. Sometimes the most important message is the simplest one. I was here. I thought about things. I tried. That is enough. More than enough. Chapter 27. Languages that survived by accident. Some ancient languages were decoded not through brilliant scholarship, but through extraordinary luck. The Rosetta Stone is the most famous example. Discovered in 1799 by a French soldier during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, it was a stone slab inscribed with the same text in 3 scripts: Egyptian hieroglyphics, Demotic, Script, and Ancient Greek. Because scholars could read Greek, they had a key. They could compare the Greek text to the hieroglyphic version and begin to work out how hieroglyphics functioned. Without the Rosetta Stone, Egyptian hieroglyphics might still be undeciphered today. The Linear B breakthrough depended on a large archive of clay tablets found at the Mycenaean palace of Pylos, tablets that survived because the palace burned down, and the fire that destroyed the palace accidentally baked the clay tablets, hardening them permanently. If the palace had simply been abandoned, and the tablets left to slowly dissolve in the rain over centuries, they would be gone. The burning that destroyed the palace is the reason we have the tablets. Destruction was preservation. Old Nubian, one of the languages that helps scholars approach Meroitic, survived because early Christian missionaries in Nubia wrote religious texts in it in the medieval period, creating a body of readable Old Nubian text. Without Christianity's spread into Nubia, the language would be entirely lost. These survivals are accidents. Contingencies. They were not planned or intended. A soldier happened to find a stone. A fire happened to bake some tablets. Missionaries happened to write in a language that preserved its structure for later scholars. And the undeciphered scripts are the ones where the accident did not happen, where the bilingual stone was never made, or was made and lost, where the archive burned and the tablets dissolved, where the missionaries arrived too late, or did not come at all. The difference between a decoded script and an undeciphered one is often not intelligence or effort, it is luck. And this is a humbling thought, not a dark one, just a realistic one. So much of what we know about the ancient world depends on the random survival of objects, and so much of what we do not know is hidden not in impenetrable complexity, but in simple physical absence. The knowledge was there, it is just not here anymore. Like trying to read a letter that got wet in the rain, that dissolved before it dried. The words were real, they are simply gone. Chapter 28. The ones still waiting. As we approach the end of this part of the journey, let me tell you about a few more voices that are still waiting to be heard. There is the Rongorongo that we discussed in part 2, still undeciphered, still patient on its dark wooden tablets. There is the Linear A of the Minoans, still silent, its underlying language still unknown. There is the Indus Script, perhaps the largest mystery of all. Those small seals with their neat rows of symbols, 4,000 years old and counting. But there are others, smaller and stranger and more obscure, that deserve at least a moment of acknowledgement. There is the Byblos syllabary, a script from the ancient Phoenician city of Byblos in what is now Lebanon, dating to roughly 1800 BCE. About 10 inscriptions survive. It has not been decoded, though some scholars have proposed partial readings. The city of Byblos incidentally gave us the word Bible. The Greek word for book, biblos, came from the city's name, because Byblos was famous for exporting papyrus. The city that gave us the word for book had its own writing system that we cannot read. There is the Isthmian script, found on stone monuments and a jade mask in the Isthmus of Tehuantepec in Mexico, dating to roughly the first few centuries of the Common Era. It may be related to Zapotec script, or it may represent an entirely different tradition. There are only a handful of inscriptions, and they have not been decoded. There is Linear Elamite, distinct from Proto-Elamite, used in ancient Iran around 2200 BC, which we mentioned earlier as possibly having been partially decoded in a 2022 study. Though the decipherment remains disputed, it is neither fully readable nor fully silent. It hovers in a liminal state, like a word that is on the tip of your tongue. And there is Wadi el Hul, a site in the Egyptian desert where inscriptions were found in 1993 that may represent the earliest known alphabetic writing, possibly dating to around 1900 Bist, earlier than the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions. These inscriptions are carved into cliff faces along an ancient road through the desert. They are short and poorly preserved, and their reading is uncertain. The earliest alphabet, scratched on a desert cliff face, readable only in fragments. The road it overlooked is still there. The desert is still there. The cliff is still there. The marks are still there. Faint in the rock, but present. Still present. And there is something I want to leave you with as we move toward the end of this fourth part and closer to the long, slow close of the whole story. All of these scripts, the decoded ones, the partially decoded ones, the completely silent ones, together form something larger than the sum of their parts. Together, they form a picture of what it means to be human, a picture of beings who looked at the world around them, found it too large and too fast and too temporary, and decided to try to hold some of it still. Who pressed their marks into whatever surface was available: clay, stone, bone, wood, bark, string, and said, in their own language, in their own time, this matters. Remember this. I want this to last. And here you are, listening. In the dark, in the quiet, in the warm and ordinary miracle of a night where you have been given nothing to do except rest. We are here. The last part. If you have travelled all the way from the beginning, through the Indus Valley and the Spiral Disc, through Easter Island and the Andes, through the jungles of Mesoamerica and the desert cliffs and the Bronze Age cities, then you have done something rare and quiet and good. And if you are nearly asleep, if the words have become soft and blurred at the edges, if you are only half hearing now, that is the most perfect thing. That is exactly what this journey was for. There is no hurry here. There is no test at the end, no summary to remember, no important detail you must hold on to. Whatever you have absorbed tonight lives in you now, in whatever form it took. That is enough, more than enough. Let us move slowly now. Let us let the story find its way to stillness. Chapter 29. What we leave behind. Every person who ever lived left something behind. Not always a writing system, not always a monument, often nothing visible at all, just a ripple in the lives of the people around them. A word said at the right moment. A kindness that changed someone's direction. A child raised with care. A small habit passed on without anyone noticing it was being passed. Most of human history is invisible in this way. The undeciphered scripts we have been discussing tonight are the rare exceptions, the moments when the invisible becomes at least partially visible. When a mark survives long enough for someone to find it and hold it and wonder. But they are not the rule. The rule is silence. The rule is that most of what happened in the human past happened without record, without monument, without any trace we can point to. And yet it all mattered. Every conversation, every meal cooked, every child comforted in the dark, every moment of kindness between two people whose names we will never know. It all happened. It was all real. The silence of the undeciphered scripts is, in this way, a kind of mirror for the larger silence of most of human experience. The Indus Valley merchant whose seal we cannot read is not so different from the countless millions of people throughout history who lived full, meaningful lives and left behind. No record at all. We do not know their names. We do not know their languages. We do not know what they thought about in quiet moments, or what they loved, or what frightened them. But they were here, on this same planet, under this same sky, breathing this same air in its older, cooler, quieter forms. They were here, and they mattered, and the world was shaped by them in ways too subtle and too deep to trace. And so were the people before them, and the people before them, all the way back through the Bronze Age and the Neolithic and the Paleolithic, through the cave painters and the tool makers and the first upright walkers, all the way back to the very beginning of what it meant to be a thinking, feeling, reaching human being. You are the latest point in a line that goes that far back. You carry all of that. Not consciously, not in any way you can see or feel directly, but in the shape of your body, in the structure of your thoughts, in the instincts and emotions and capacities that are yours simply because you are human. You belong to all of it, and all of it, in some quiet way, belongs to you. Chapter 30. The Beauty of Not Knowing. I want to talk for a moment about something that our culture does not always make room for. The beauty of not knowing. We live in a time of extraordinary access to information. Whatever you want to know, you can find in seconds. Questions that would have required years of scholarship a century ago can now be answered while you are standing in line at a shop. The sum of human knowledge is more available to more people than at any point in history. And this is genuinely wonderful. I do not want to diminish it. But there is something that gets lost in the culture of instant answers. The capacity to sit with a question without immediately reaching for the answer. The ability to let not knowing be a state you inhabit for a while, rather than a problem to be immediately solved. The undeciphered scripts teach us something about this. They have been not known for a very long time, centuries in some cases, more than a century for most. And in that time, they have continued to exist and to matter and to draw the attention of careful, serious, brilliant people, not despite being unknowable, but partly because of it. The mystery is part of what makes them compelling. The silence is part of what makes them speak. If we could read the Phaistos Disc tomorrow, if a bilingual inscription were found, or a descendant language identified, or a brilliant decipherment published that finally held, up under scrutiny, it would be extraordinary. It would be a triumph of human scholarship. It would make front pages around the world. But something would also be lost. The particular quality of attention that the undeciphered disc demands, the kind of attention that does not assume, does not project, does not fill in the gaps, that would be gone. The silence would end. And with the silence, something irreplaceable would close. Not knowing is not a failure state. It is a valid way of being in relationship with something. Sometimes the most honest thing you can say about a mystery is, I do not know, and I am here with it anyway. Paying attention, keeping it company, not turning away. That is wisdom. A quiet, patient, undervalued kind of wisdom. And tonight, you have practiced it. You have kept company with mysteries that have no answer tonight, and may have no answer for another 1,000 years, or ever. You have not demanded that they give up their secrets. You have simply listened, in the dark, with an open and unhurried mind. That is a rare and valuable thing. Chapter 31. The languages still being born. Here is something warm to hold in your mind as the night deepens. Even as ancient languages are lost, new ones are being born. Language never stops moving. It grows and changes and adapts. It mixes with other languages in the unpredictable way of living things. New words enter. Old words shift meaning. Pronunciation drifts over generations until children speak differently from their grandparents without noticing it has happened. There are languages that have come into existence within living memory. Nicaraguan Sign Language, for example, developed spontaneously in the 1970s and 1980s when deaf children were brought together in schools for the first time in Nicaragua. Without any adult teaching them a formal sign language, the children created one. A complete, complex, rule-governed language invented by children at play. Linguists who observed this called it one of the most remarkable events in the history of language study. A new language appearing in real time before their eyes. Language is alive. It does not wait for permission. It does not need planning or committees or ancient traditions. It grows where humans are, the way plants grow where there is light and water. And this means that even as the Indus Script sits in its silence, even as the Minoan language remains unknown, even as the Rongorongo tablets wait in their museum cases, new languages are forming. New words are being coined. New ways of organizing meaning are emerging in communities around the world. The river of human language does not stop. It loses tributaries and gains new ones. It changes course. It deepens in some places and spreads wide and shallow in others. But it flows on. It has always flowed on. And you are in it. Right now, every thought you think in the language of your mind, every word you whisper before sleep, every dream that comes in words, you are part of the river. Not watching from the bank. In it, moving with it. Let that feeling be a warm one. Let it carry you a little further into the night. Chapter 32. A final pause before the quiet. You have been so patient tonight, so willing to travel and wonder and not know and rest and keep going. Before the last chapter, let us stop once more, very briefly, very gently. Notice the weight of your eyelids. If they are heavy, that heaviness is not something to fight. It is the body asking for rest in the kindest possible way. The body is very good at knowing what it needs. It has been doing this for a very long time, long before any language existed to describe it. Let your hands be completely still. Let your feet be completely still. Let the surface beneath you do all the work of holding you. Feel the temperature of the air near your face. Cool, perhaps, if the window is open. Or warm and enclosed if the room is sealed against the night. Either way, that air has been breathed by every living thing in this room, is passing through you now, and will go on being breathed long after you are asleep. There is something almost impossibly gentle about breathing. The way it continues without your attention. The way it never asks anything of you. The way it kept going through every night of your life, while you dreamed of strange landscapes and distant faces and things that made no sense and perfect sense at once. Right now, just for a moment, let yourself feel grateful for your breath, for the quiet, reliable, ancient mechanism of it. In and out. In and out. The Minoan scribes breathed like this. The Harappan merchants breathed like this. The person who carved the Phaistos Disc breathed like this, bent over their work in whatever light they had, pressing the reed into the clay with careful, deliberate hands. Breathing slowly. The same breath. The same rhythm. The same quiet persistence of a body doing what bodies do. You are connected to all of them through this. Through the simple, biological, unromantic, completely extraordinary fact of breathing. You are here. You are breathing. You belong to the long history of things that breathed. That is enough. Now let the last chapter come. Chapter 33. What the Stone Remembers. There is a quality that stone has, which clay and wood and bark paper do not. Stone remembers differently. Clay tablets, even baked ones, are fragile. They crack and chip. They dissolve in water. They require careful preservation. The clay tablets we have are the ones that survived by luck, baked by accident in palace fires, stored in dry caves, buried deep enough to avoid the plough. Wood rots. Bark paper crumbles, linen wrappings dissolve, metal oxidizes. But stone, properly dense, properly sheltered stone, can wait an almost unimaginable length of time. The petroglyphs we mentioned earlier, carved into cliff faces tens of thousands of years ago, are still there, still visible. The marks of human hands pressed into the record of rock, outlasting everything else about the people who made them. Their clothing is gone, their fires are ash. Their voices, their laughter, their arguments, their songs, all of it dissolved into the air within seconds of being made. Even their bones in most cases have turned to mineral or dust. But the marks in the rock are still there, and when you visit these places, when you stand before a cliff face in the American Southwest, or in the Sahara, or in Scandinavia, there is a moment of contact that is unlike almost anything else. You are looking at something that a human hand touched. You are looking at the direct result of a deliberate human choice made in a specific moment by a specific person who had a reason. The rock does not interpret. It does not translate. It simply holds. It holds the mark the same way it holds everything else, without judgment, without preference, without decay. It holds the mark because that is what stone does. And in that holding, something of the person is preserved. Not their thought, we cannot hear their thought. Not their language, we cannot speak their language. But their presence. Their having been here. The simple and extraordinary fact of them. I think about this sometimes when I think about what memory really is. Not just human memory, the kind we carry in our heads, that fades and distorts and reconstructs and loses detail every time it is accessed, but the broader memory of the world. The way stone remembers, the way sediment layers remember the years of their deposit, ring by ring, the way ice cores remember the atmosphere of centuries past, bubble by bubble, the way a tree's growth rings remember the good years and the hard years. The world is full of memory. We are walking through an enormous, patient, largely silent record of everything that has ever happened. And the undeciphered scripts are just the most human part of that record. The part where the memory is deliberate, where someone decided consciously to add their mark to the record of the world. You are adding to it too. Every day, in ways you mostly do not notice. The mark of your having been here is being made constantly, in the stone of other people's memories, in the small changes you cause in the world around you, in the words you speak and the choices you make and the kindness you show or withhold. The record is being written all the time. You are writing it right now. Chapter 34. Coming Home. We are near the end now. I can feel it, the way a long walk begins to feel different when you can see the place you started from. The air changes slightly. The pace changes slightly. The quality of attention shifts from outward to inward. We have been many places tonight. We stood in the ancient city of the Indus Valley and looked at a small carved seal with symbols we cannot read. We sat with the Phaistos Disc in its museum case, tracing its spiral with our eyes. We walked the roads of Easter Island and held the dark wooden tablets of Rongorongo in our imagination. We crossed the Atlantic and stood in the green jungle shadow of Mesoamerican temples. We followed the Nile south to the Meroitic pyramids. We climbed into the high Andes and touched the knotted strings of the Quipu. We sat with the patience of scholars who gave their lives to listening. We thought about the languages that were never written, the ones that vanished without leaving a mark. We thought about what it means to not know something, and found that not knowing can be its own kind of presence. And now we are coming home. Not to a specific place, but to the feeling of having travelled and returned, the feeling of having been somewhere wide and old and strange, and of being now back in the familiar warmth of the present moment, the ordinary miracle of a body resting in the dark. This is always how the long journey ends. Not with a destination, but with a return. Not with answers, but with a different quality of silence. A silence that feels fuller than it did at the start. More inhabited. More alive. You came into this night with whatever you were carrying, whatever thoughts and worries and leftover energies of the day. And somewhere along the way, somewhere between the Indus Valley and the Andes, those things softened. Not because they were solved, not because the world got simpler, but because you spent time with something much larger than the immediate. Time with the ancient, with the patient, with the enduring, and the immediate feels lighter after that. More manageable, more proportionate. The worry that felt enormous at the start of the evening is still there, perhaps, but it is smaller now, set against the backdrop of 5,000 years of human striving and wondering and trying. Everything is smaller against that backdrop. And strangely, that smallness is a comfort. Because if everything is small, then nothing is too heavy to carry. Nothing is too important to set down. You can set it all down tonight. You already are. Chapter 35. The Last Language. I want to tell you, before the end, about one more language. Not an ancient one. Not an undeciphered one. The language of sleep. It is the oldest language any of us knows. We knew it before we knew words. Before we could speak or understand our mother tongue. Before any symbol meant anything to us. We knew this language. We were born knowing it. It is a language of sensation and drift. Of images that arrive without logic and depart without explanation. Of feelings that have no name in any waking vocabulary. Of a kind of thinking that does not follow the rules of waking thought, more associative, more fluid, more willing to let one thing become another without transition or explanation. The language of sleep is the most universal language that exists. Every culture, every civilization, every people who ever lived, regardless of what script they used, regardless of what words they spoke, regardless of whether their language is, still known or has been lost for thousands of years, every one of them dreamed. The Indus Valley merchant dreamed. The Minoan scribe dreamed. The person who carved the Phaistos Disc lay down at night and entered the same wordless country that you enter every night. They saw things that made no sense and perfect sense. They flew, perhaps, or fell, or found themselves in rooms that shifted and changed. They saw faces of people they loved, and people they feared, and people they had never met in waking life. They woke sometimes in the night, and lay in the darkness, and felt the strange residue of wherever they had been. Just like you, just like all of us. And in that shared country, the country of sleep, of dream, of the deep wordless mind, there are no undeciphered scripts. There is no mystery of language. There are no barriers between the living and the ancient dead. In sleep, everything is present at once. Everything is near. The ordinary separations of time and culture and language dissolve, and what is left is something very simple and very large. The feeling of being alive, of being a mind inside a body, moving through the world, trying to understand things, reaching out toward other minds. That is what all the scripts were about. All of them. The decoded and the undeciphered alike. That reaching, that persistent, patient, beautiful reaching. Across every distance, across every silence, across the thousands of years between you and the people who pressed their marks into clay and stone and bone and string, they were reaching, and you were here to receive it. Chapter 36, The Slow Fade. The story is nearly over now, and I want it to end the way a long journey ends, not with a sharp stop, not with a sudden silence, but with a gradual slowing. A settling, a gentle return to stillness. Like a river approaching the sea, the river does not stop at a line. It slows, it widens, it spreads, it becomes less like a river and more like something vast and quiet and without a single direction. That is where we are going, toward the vast and quiet. If you are still listening, that is wonderful. Let the words wash over you now without needing to hold them. Let them pass through you like music that does not need to be analysed to be felt. If you are half sleeping, if the words are reaching you through a warm haze, arriving softly and dissolving softly, that is exactly right. Let them dissolve. Let them become part of the texture of the night, like the sound of rain, like the hum of a distant road, like the sound of breathing in a quiet room. You do not need to be awake for this part. This part is just for the feeling of having come somewhere and learnt something and been somewhere wide and old. The feeling of being small in the best way, small and safe and held by something much larger than yourself. The feeling of the night, which has been here before you and will be here after you, wrapping around the room, wrapping around the city and the fields and the mountains and the ocean, wrapping around the whole turning world with its patient, impersonal, gentle dark. You are inside that dark right now. Not alone in it, never alone in it. The ancient scribes are in it too, in whatever way the past inhabits the present. The Minoan scribe with their reed stylus, the Harappan merchant with their stone seal, the Rapa Nui elder who could read Rongorongo and carried the knowledge in their memory and took it with them into the dark. They are all here in the long sense of here, in the sense that everything that ever happened still exists somewhere in the record of the world, as real and as present as it ever was, even when it is silent. The silence is full. You are inside the full silence, and it is holding you gently, the way the earth holds everything that rests on it, without effort, without asking anything in return, without ever letting go a final word. There is one thing I want to say before the words run out. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, for giving your attention, which is the most valuable thing any of us has, to these old and patient mysteries. For being willing to not know, for being willing to simply travel and wonder and rest. The world is full of things that want your attention urgently, things that insist, that demand, that pull and push and declare themselves important in loud voices. Tonight you chose something different. You chose the quiet, the old, the mysterious, the gentle. That is a good choice. It is always a good choice. And now the choice is for sleep. Let the scripts dissolve. Let the symbols become shapes without meaning. Just shapes. Just lines and curves and spirals and dots floating in the warm dark behind your eyelids. Let the Phaistos Disc spin slowly and become just a circle. Let the linear A tablets become just flat surfaces. Let the Rongorongo glyphs become just small marks. Just small, beautiful marks, meaning everything and nothing, full of an ancient care that does not need to be understood to be. Felt. Let the Indus Valley seals rest in their museum cases, their symbols patient and unhurried in the climate-controlled quiet. Let the pyramids of Miro stand in the desert dark, the stars above them thick and cold, the prayers on their inner walls addressed to gods whose names we cannot yet speak. Let the quippers hang in their careful rows, their coloured strings holding whatever they hold, their meanings waiting, their patience infinite. Let the stone remember what the stone remembers. Let the clay hold what the clay holds. Let the old world rest. And let yourself rest with it. You are safe. The night is kind, the dark is warm, the mysteries are patient, and they do not need you to solve them tonight. They only needed you to be here. And you were. You are. Rest now. Sleep now. The long journey is complete.